Welcome to In Studio. I'm Jay Daniels. Recently, the beloved children's program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, celebrated its 50th anniversary. Hosted by Fred Rogers, the show continues to make an indelible impact upon children and adults all around the world. Music was also an integral part of the neighborhood. Fred wrote many of the songs, and they were performed by artists like jazz pianist Johnny Costa and today's in-studio guest, Joe Negri. You might remember him as Handyman Negri from the neighborhood. Recently, I had the honor of speaking with him by phone. During the conversation, Mr. Negri and I talked about his musical upbringing in Pittsburgh, along with stories from his early career and time in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. In his own words, here's Joe Negri.
I grew up in a rather modest, actually kind of a poor family. My dad was an immigrant, and he was a bricklayer, but kind of an amateur musician, you know.
Yeah. He
played the fiddle and he played the banjo, and we had Carlo Butti records from. He was a popular singer in Italy, and we had opera records my grandmother played for me. So they said at 18 months old, I was singing La Donna Mobile, you know, La Donna Mobile, più al vento. So that's the kind of environment I grew up in. And my dad kind of must have realized, hey, this kid's got a bit of an ear and he's got a little talent. So we started singing quite early, 2-3 years old, you know. And it was the day of the very popular children's shows on radio. There was a bunch of uncles, you know, Uncle Sammy, Uncle Harry, Uncle this. And there was also a show here in Pittsburgh that was called Pittsburgh on Parade that featured young talent. So I kind of got, little by little, I got involved in all of that. I was going on the radio once a week. My dad would teach me the music. My mother and my aunt would teach me the words. And we'd learn a new song every week, you know, and I'd go on the air and sing it. And this went on till maybe I was 4 or 5 years old. The rehearsing with the pianist at the radio station kind of became a little bit of kind of a pain. And so my dad decided to get me a ukulele, and I started playing the ukulele and accompanying myself, you know. So then I didn't need the pianist. I didn't need to go to the rehearsal. I just learned my song, and I strummed a little ukulele, and it was a great time for songs, you know, the mid 30s, early 30s, beautiful song, My Ideal, and I can't even remember some of them, but there was every week I would learn a new tune, you know.
Yeah.
Pardon Me, Pretty Baby, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. You probably don't remember any of those songs.
Well, My Ideal is a favorite of mine, Ain't Misbehavin', from that same time. I grew up watching the Our Gang comedies, which, of course, a lot of them were made in the 30s with Alfalfa Schweitzer singing. And so a lot of the songs that you're talking about, I didn't grow up in the 30s, but I certainly remember those songs for sure.
Yeah. Well, that was my early career. And little by little, then we started taking dance lessons, and my brother joined me. He was 2 years younger. He was quite a good tap dancer for a 6 or 7 year old, you know. So then our cousin, who was about my brother's age, joined us, and we had a group called the Rhythm Boys. And now we have an act, you know.
Yeah.
So I would go out and open the act with a song with my ukulele, take the uke back to the wings, give it to my father, and then the three of us would go out and we would dance. We would do a tap dance routine, Bye Bye Blues or something like that, you know, a kind of a swing dance.
Yeah.
We did military tap, we did swing dances, we did different kinds of dance routines. And that went on, Jay, until I was about 12, 13 years old. A voice change hit me. My voice started cracking, and I I became quite embarrassed, and little by little I wouldn't sing. So that was a deciding factor, though, because without the singing, I don't know how I did it, but I went from the uke, which was kind of, really not enough of an accompaniment. So little by little, my dad started teaching me the guitar, and I started learning some chords on the guitar. And instead of the uke, then I started playing the guitar for my songs. When I was about 13, I kind of really got serious about the guitar, and he found me a very good teacher, a fellow named Victor Lawrence, who taught here in Pittsburgh and eventually opened up his own store and wrote a couple books and that kind of thing. So I really got very deeply involved with the guitar then, and it went from there. By the time I was 16, I was playing so damn good, I went and auditioned for Sheffield's orchestra.
Yeah.
And went on the road at 16 years old, left high school.
And you got to play right along with his, what was it, the Rippling Rhythm, I think is what he called his?
No, he had changed the band then. He had a jazz band. It was an all-saxophone band.
Yeah.
And he had really good jazz musicians, and I learned a lot from them. They were really some outstanding guys,
Yeah. And you were coming up in a time when this music was, it was mainstream. It was the popular music of the day, and you had several other guitarists that served as influences for you, correct?
Yeah, I did. Even before the jazz guys, I was very much influenced through Vic Lawrence by the what I call the jazz guitar pioneers: Eddie Lang, Carl Kress, Dick McDonough, George Van Epps. Those guys that were all wonderful chordal type guitarists, before the electric really became popular. Most of them played acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
Then it was the Benny Goodman Orchestra that really, really turned me around, because I heard this electric guitar played by Charlie Christian, and that was a very big turning point. I started to transcribe Charlie Christian's solos and, Rose Room, a couple of things, Solo Flight, all those good Christian did. So that was it. And that takes me up until the darn Army grabbed me, and I went into, I couldn't make a special service at the beginning. I went into the infantry, was sent to Georgia, outside of Macon, Georgia, a place called Camp Wheeler, and took an 18-week course as an infantry replacement, and was sent overseas to Germany. I just missed the Battle of the Bulge by maybe not even a month. I got there right after the Bulge, and had that not been the case, who knows? That Battle of the Bulge was a terrible loss for a lot of lives,
How long did you end up serving?
Almost 2 years. So here's the beauty part of it. So I'm stationed in Eupen, no, not Eupen. I'm stationed in Essen, Germany, right on the Rhine River. Patton is he's going like a bat out of hell to Russia. And he was moving so fast that our battalion couldn't catch up with them. And so we stayed in there, and what we started doing is they had us taking care of displaced people, Russians and Polish and Jewish people and all of that, I even met an Italian guy, so he helped me a little bit with we kind of like rapped back and forth with my broken Italian, and he helped me converse with some of these people, and we had to get them figured out where they lived and how they were going to get back to Poland and how they were going to go back to Russia, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I did for several months. Along comes what do you call this, guys? He wasn't a full officer. and he gives me a 3-day pass. Me and another fellow who played the trumpet, and we go up to Belgium to like a hangout place for a couple of days where you can relax a bit. So I go up there. We go to a nightclub the very first night, and there's a Django Reinhardt type guy on the bandstand with an acoustic guitar. And my buddy says, "Why don't you go up and play a tune?" So I go up and I borrow his acoustic guitar. Now I'm really not a Django kind of a player. I never was. So I sit in with that band, and it just so happened that the officer in charge of special services was sitting in the audience. And wouldn't you know, he grabs me and he says, "How would you like to transfer to our special service unit?" And I said, "Oh my God, I'd love to. That's what I wanted to do in the beginning." So he got me out of the infantry, took me up there, and I stayed with them, special service unit, and we entertained and we played for dancing and different things like that. We had a bunch of beautiful French girls staying in the big house with us, and it was it was very nice, really.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Being in the Army. And the best part about it, Jay, was once the war ended, and it was around May, I guess, and this 13th Special Service Unit had been in Europe since the start of the war.
Yeah.
So they were one of the first to be picked to go home. So Lucky Joe goes home, back to the States. Yeah, I don't know. Somebody was praying for me, that's for sure. I get back here. I took a short, maybe 2-week, what do they call them, furlough. And then they sent me to New Jersey, outside of the dock where the soldiers were coming back. And I was in a band, and I could play the trumpet a little bit. So we faked the trumpet, the cornet. I would go to the dock with the trumpet, and then in the evenings I would play for the dances and the stuff like that in the I don't know, I can't remember all the names of those places where the soldiers would hang out, and and that's what I did for the rest of my Army career, almost 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I got out in what would that be? About 45, I guess. I went in about 44, but I got out late 45, 46. Well, my brother by this time was playing some piano. So I come home, and we decided to get a little trio going and start working some gigs around town and playing some little bars, little jazz clubs. We found a good bass player, and so the first thing I do is Nat Cole was real popular in that day. I'm singing a little bit again, not like I used to, not that Bobby Breen high tenor voice, but just kind of a little bit of a jazz style, So I'm singing, and we're doing a lot of Nat Cole stuff plus some other stuff, and we're getting a few jobs, and we're working pretty good. Not making a whole lot of money. I happened to run into Johnny Costa. That was one of your questions. Johnny was working. Johnny had been in the service in Europe too. He had been with the medical corps, and he was one of those guys that would help wounded soldiers and try to get them out of the battlefield, and that's what he did. He wasn't an infantryman or anything like that. So I meet Johnny. There's a wonderful hotel in Pittsburgh. It was called the William Penn, but now it's called the Omni. And the William Penn has always played a role in his life and my life. We've always kind of worked there. They had a very fancy lobby, and they always had a grand piano. In fact, you'd get a kick out of this. Andre Previn just died, and the piano that was in the lobby was given to the William Penn by Andre Previn. It had his name on it. It was the Andre Previn piano, and Johnny played it, and several others played it. And I would go in there with my trio, and I didn't work with Johnny so much, but we got to be acquainted. And then, wouldn't you know, he and I started playing like fancy gigs, like society gigs. I don't know if you remember the name, the Hillmans, Henry and Elsie Hillman. They were very wealthy Pittsburghers. Elsie had a lot to do with the starting of WQED, the educational TV station here in Pittsburgh.
Sure.
So we would play gigs, Johnny and I, and that's how we got acquainted. You know, we would play like society jobs, but the society jobs were jobs that, you know, you had to know Cole Porter and, you know, Jerome Kern, and you had to play songs like "I Get a Kick Out of You," "I've Got You Under My Skin," that kind of repertoire, you know, repertoire.
Yeah.
And we were both good at that. We knew the tunes and everything. So, you know, little by little. Meanwhile, Johnny's going to Carnegie Mellon. And I'm saying to myself, darn it, I just got to do something, you know, because the money wasn't good and I was kind of struggling a bit, you know. So Johnny says to me, "Why don't you come to Carnegie Mellon?" I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "Well, you could try out for guitar." So I do, and the first thing they tell me is, "We're not accepting guitar." So I said, "Well, what can I do?" He said, "Well, you could try out for composition." So I meet a guy named Nikolai Lopotnikov, a wonderful composer from Russia, who was the composition teacher at CMU. And I write a piece. He says, "Write me something." I write a piece, and I get accepted as a composition major. And I started Carnegie Mellon, and I stayed there throughout my freshman year and through most of my sophomore year. I didn't get into my junior year. So I remember you asked me a question about, it was an interesting question.
Yeah.
What did I like about Carnegie Mellon? I
think you said it was some of the most important years as far as becoming who you were, really rounding you out, I think was the way that you put it.
Yeah, it really did. I'll tell you what, you know, remember I told you I grew up basically in the music business, playing jazz, playing clubs. Wasn't really too educated. I had to go finish my high school. I had to get my high school degree so that I could go to Carnegie Mellon. So I did. I did get my high school degree as a veteran. I got that. So I go into Carnegie Mellon. First of all, I'm really very impressed at learning the theory, learning the harmony, learning counterpoint. It kind of put it all together, you know. I knew the changes to "I Get a Kick Out of You" or just one of those things, but I really didn't know the theory about it. I didn't know tonics or subdominants or dominants or altered chords or, you know, or counterpoint. I didn't know any of that stuff. So, and I learned it quickly, you know, and that was the musical side of it. But even more important than that was I learned to express myself. I wasn't very good at talking, you know. I couldn't. I'd express myself musically more than verbally. So I took a course there in my freshman year called Thought and Expression. I had to write a paper, and it said, you know, explain some of your problems in an essay, in a paper. So I write this paper and talk about how difficult it is for me to express myself. The English teacher gives me a C and says, "You certainly did a good job of expressing yourself." And
yeah, you proved the point very well.
Yeah, and little by little, that was a changing point in my life. I started to learn how to talk. And thank God I did, because I got into television and, I had to talk. I don't think I would ever be as good as some of the TV personalities and announcers, but I did improve quite a bit,
Yeah.
I learned to be a conversationalist and learn to express myself. And that's what Carnegie Mellon did.
I was actually talking with my former choir director. Her name is Karen, and I was telling her that I was going to be interviewing you. And I didn't realize how much of a role Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and specifically your character in that program, had played. And she said, the thing about Joe Negri is that he often made life and those discussions on the program so much easier to understand. He was able to put me as a child at ease and really bring it down to my level. And do you think little things like that, I suppose they do make a great impact, don't they?
Yeah. The handyman role, I'm not an actor. I played myself. I don't know if you've ever read stories like about Spencer Tracy. He always said, I just played myself. I wasn't an actor. I always felt very, very much like that. And, but I played Joe in a very kind of, compromising kind of way. Not compromising. He was very generous with people and very open, and kind of like the neighborhood guy, where the people would kind of let their hair down, and if they had a problem, they'd ask Handyman. That kind of thing.
Thinking about that role, and there are so many stories that we could share, and many of them have already been shared. You've done a number of interviews, especially as of late. Mr. Rogers' popularity is probably greater than it was when the show was originally on.
I think it has. This 50th anniversary has been phenomenal. It's really brought him back.
But I want to think about something, because we talk about the success of the program, but I want to ask the question of you. You look at the many lives that you have been able to enrich through your work. And I don't think that you ever went into that work thinking, well, let me see how many people that I can, reach through this, or let me talk to millions. I don't think you ever went into it with that attitude.
No, I
but
didn't.
The question that I would have is, as so many children and even adults, I'm 30, I still watch the program on a regular basis.
Uh-huh.
As our lives have been enriched, how would you say that your life was enriched through that work?
Well, that's a really good question. I was enriched by the association with Fred, who, beside his religious strong points, he was a very, very understanding guy and a very, very close friend of musicians. He thought of himself as a musician, and he said to me once, he said, if I really would have had my druthers, Joe, I would have been a songwriter. He really wanted to be a songwriter, and I've always liked that about him, and we had a great understanding. And Johnny with his with his rough edges and his Toby in his mouth and all that, and the way he swore and everything. But we had just the greatest relationship, the three of us, and it was music that did it. And thank goodness that Fred decided at some point to open up Negri's music shop, because that became a way for us to really express ourselves and bring in some good people and push jazz even a little more, which Johnny and I always tried to do.
Yeah, I remember there was one particular episode, and you remember this one, of course, one of the more popular ones, where Mr. Rogers walks into the shop and you look at him and say, oh, yes, Wynton Marsalis, he's just rehearsing in the back. And I thought, you never know who's going to show up at
Who was it, Jay? Who was it?
Wynton Marsalis.
Oh, Wynton, yeah, Wynton. Oh, that was funny. That was a funny day, Jay. Yeah. That really was. Wynton, we get together earlier because he wanted to, he just wanted to check out the band and Johnny and the bass and everything. So he I could see it in his eyes. He's looking and he said, I could see it. He wanted to say, let's play something. And finally he did. He said, can we just jam a little bit? So we did. And the minute we did, I guess we didn't play more than a minute or so, and I could see the relief in his eyes, and he said, okay, let's go from here. And we went.
And yeah.
He was happy with all of us.
You think about those special moments, and I know that our time is limited, so I will try to just ask a couple of closing thoughts.
Yeah.
Throughout the show, not only were you able to impart wisdom to the children watching through your work as Handyman Negri, but you were also able to share the gift of music through those occurrences with, say, Wynton Marsalis or someone else like Yo-Yo Ma. And you,
Yo-Yo Ma,
and you also are a music teacher. In fact, you still teach music there in Pittsburgh.
I do.
For you, why is it so important that we continue to share that gift of music through not only the promotion of tunes such as, performed on the radio, but also teaching children and adults through music education? Why is it important that we share music in that way?
That's a great question, Jay. I'll tell you why. I have a couple of loves. I think, first of all, and utmost, is the guitar. And I do everything to keep the guitar, respected. And I'm very unhappy with some of the stuff that you hear today musically and the way some guitar players play. But my kids, they're all learning the fingerboard. They're learning the chords. They're learning how to play chord melodies. They're learning how to improvise. So that means a lot to me, that I can continue to pass this on to other people. You asked something else besides the guitar. Oh, I'm a composer, see, and I write, and I like to pass that on. And I'll tell you, man, I have a desk here. I've written about 3 books of guitar solos. I've written a book of Bach violin sonatas. I transcribed them for guitar. That kind of stuff. So I keep myself very busy musically, even though I'm not performing as much as I used to, and I honestly don't miss it because the clubs aren't what they used to be, And my age, I don't need to be going out there and working for $1.50 for 3 hours.
Yeah, as it turns out, the pay that the clubs offer is about the same as it was when you and Johnny Costa were starting out in the 50s.
Just about. I think the young kids from Duquesne University, where I teach, are playing at the Omni, and I think they're lucky if they're making $1.50.
Yeah. And by the way, you mentioned compositions. There was one that you didn't mention. I believe it's called A Mass of New Hope. Is that right?
Yeah, The Mass of Hope. The Mass of Hope. I guess that's one of my biggest forms of expression. I think it took quite a bit, and it's kind of popular. People seem to like it. I've done it not only in Catholic churches, but in Protestant churches, Presbyterian churches, Methodist churches, several choirs. I think the only necessary requirement is if the choir can read. The rest of it is a piece of cake. What I did get a kick out of is some of the choirs would say to me, "Oh, the alto part is really tough because you get that close harmony. Like jazz harmonies are a little bit closer than classical harmonies. They're tighter." But other than that, they've all enjoyed it, and they like the melody of it and the feel of it and the swing of it and everything. It was a lot of fun doing that Mass.
Oh, yes. And it's just another way of being able to impact others through music. And I think it's something wonderful that brings people together. And it's been a joy to talk with you about your experiences and what stories to be shared. I think we've only just uncovered a few today, and hopefully we can do this again sometime soon. Yeah.
Well, listen, I enjoyed it, and you just you just left me wide open there. I hope you can use a lot of that stuff.
I can.
I think there was one thing you were going to ask me at the very end, and it was something about what do I like about music or something.
I think it was Yeah, just basically the question was, what does music mean to you? That was the last question.
Well, here's what I was going to tell you. Everything. Music means everything. Next to my wife and my family.
Our guest in studio, Joe Negri. For more information on Joe and his music, be sure and visit the website, joenegri.com. Our special thanks to Joe for speaking with us, and I hope that we'll get to do it again sometime soon. What a privilege. Until we meet again, I'm Jay Daniels, hoping that you'll join us in studio.